Welcome to Side Effects, effect versus affect. It's hard to know the difference. At McGohan Brabender, our goal is to provoke you to think differently about employee benefits, your employees, and the status quo. That's why it's Side Effects with an A. Join me, Kenzie McEvily, my co-host Marie Singleton, and our guest joining us from Tiffin University for a 5-part podcast series about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Let's get started. For part 2 of this 5-part podcast series, our experts, Nadia Lewis and Julia Porter from Tiffin University, are here to share how to be a more inclusive company. Today, we're going to learn the best practices for hiring and retaining diverse employees. Nadia serves as the Vice President for Human Resources and for the Center of Intercultural Excellence. She has a degree in International Business from the University of Cincinnati, a master's in organizational leadership with a focus in human resource management, along with a certification in strategic global organizational leadership from Colorado Global. Julia is the director for the Center of Intercultural Excellence and has a degree in English education from IUPUI, a master's in English literature from Brooklyn College, and a PhD in global leadership from Indiana Tech. As you can hear, we're in very capable, educated, and cultured hands today. Let's get into today's topic. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our 5-part podcast. Marie, thank you for joining me in the studio.
Yes, so happy to be here and so happy to have our guests with us again today, Julia and Nadia. Welcome.
Our experts.
Hi.
So I am especially excited about this episode because we want to help our listeners and our HR professionals out there. So we often get asked when speaking with our employer groups about inclusion in benefits. So how do we offer benefits that meet the needs of our entire workforce? And we like to think we're pretty good at coming up with ideas, but after learning more and more about what diversity, equity, and inclusion is from you ladies, we probably have a lot of work to do in this space. So we're growing and learning here. And, we want to hire and retain diverse employees in our own population here at McGohan Brabender as well. So we would love it if you would start our episode off today with what I call simple, putting it in quotes, definition of what is diversity, because what we learned from our first episode is it's so much more than just race or gender. It includes so many other things. So I'll ask you, what is your simple definition of diversity? Don't all answer at once.
I know. Julie and I always tend to go, so I always look for her signal. Or
we always look at each other to see who's going to talk. Go ahead,
I know. Diversity is and I'm going to put DEI in all of this, right? So diversity, equity, and inclusion. So many times, and I think this is, what drives maybe a little bit of the discontent when there's that small select few that hear the words DEI or the acronym DEI, that they feel that it is segmented for the benefit of a population or group, a set population or group. That's not necessarily true. I will say there has been a population group that has been marginalized and underrepresented, which has propelled the energy of the conversations around DEI and belonging. So DEI-B now. And so that has been the case, but it has always been evolving because at the end of the day, it meant to include people in their very diverse needs and perspectives. And so it's not just for someone who's Black or someone who's Asian or someone who is transgender. It's for everyone, every single one of us. Julia, Kenzie, Marie, we all have different needs. How we show up to the workplace is all very different. Even though behind the camera we might be laughing and we have so many things in common, we still have very diverse needs and wants, especially in the workplace. And so that's what our conversations of DEI really started with is how do you then focus and pay attention to the diverse needs of your workforce? And it can be females, it can be a working mom, it can be so many different representation in the landscape. Whomever your employees and whomever your customers are, you should get to know who they are, how they're unique, and how you can connecting on that relationship side of being human and being able to work together, to be collaborative. That, for me, is the DEI conversation in space.
Yeah.
And I think we forget so many things of DEI, like the difference between living in a rural or urban environment, the difference between income levels, the difference between those that are working parents and those that aren't. There are so many things that make each of us unique that relate to this as well, and how you need to be supporting these employees based on what they're walking into that day at work.
Yeah. So how can employers encourage diverse employees to come to their organizations, especially if they struggle with living in a certain area where there isn't much diversity?
Right. So recruitment, right? How do you go through that recruitment process of knowing how to attract, and then in another conversation, retaining a diverse workforce? And so there's a lot that has to go, along with that. I always recommend, first of all, recruiting there's lots of different sites that you can recruit from. And so casting that talent net wider. You have to develop a recruitment practice and initiatives before you start doing this. And then the first thing I always want to encourage people to do is hire for potential.
Yes.
Not necessarily experience. That if you're not going to get diverse talent if you're only hiring for experience.
That's a game
because
changer.
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
There's so many people who haven't been exposed. This is where we then talk about privilege, right? There's so many people who haven't had the opportunity to have the access and resources as someone else, but the potential is there. And how many times have we heard, whether from a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a friend, or a child even, that they're so appreciative and excited because they did not have necessarily the full experience for a job, but someone saw something in them. And that was me too. First getting started in my career, someone saw, thankfully saw something in them, in me, that afforded me the opportunity to be able to showcase my talents. And in turn, epiphany, sometimes what you thought you needed wasn't exactly what it was. And you allowed this person to show, gosh, we can do so much more, or there's so much that we can do because this person has shown it to us.
Yeah.
So hire for the potential. When it comes to recruiting initiative and practices, business leaders must look to look past the mindset of talent pools, right? You have your set platforms. I'm not going to say names here. We support and love all of them.
Right.
But in conversations of casting that net wider, try maybe advertising for HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, community colleges. What about there's business associations and professional associations that foster diverse talent pools. You have Asian Business Association, National Association of Black Accountants. I'm in HR. There's a National African American Human Resource Society on LinkedIn. I always say in LinkedIn, there's a group for everybody, right?
There is. There definitely
so advertise within those groups. Advertise where you look and see, gosh, we need a more diverse landscape in our accounting group. And I would love to foster that.
Yeah.
Then, maybe you advertise in the National Association of Black Accountants. Maybe you advertise in Association of Latino Professionals for America. There's a landscape and a way to attract diverse talents.
So
another thing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm going to ask you a question about that. So let's say, you do those things, you attract the pool, the candidates into the pool. They apply for your role at your company. You're really excited about that. They come to the organization. They meet the other employees as they go through the process, and nobody looks like them. They quickly realize that maybe they're the start of something, or it's scary for them, like nobody around here for me to relate to. So what can you do not to scare those candidates once they're already in the application process? And
would they pull out? Or
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, because that is
a
huge.
Great question.
And as much as I cast my net wide to attract diverse talents, I'm well aware that that is also a concern. Tiffin, we're not gifted yet to have the population of our workforce that mirrors the population of our student, which I shared in the earlier podcast, that we have students that represent 33 different countries. We're not there yet with our staff and faculty. I would love it to be, because man, what a powerful representation for our students to see people that look like them, that have their master's degree, their doctorate degrees, is teaching and is mentoring them. So how you do that is, first and foremost, when you do your job templates and your posting, put a diversity statement up there. It's not that hard. We came up with a mission and a vision, and on every one of our posting, our diversity statement is there. I can't tell you how many times I sit down with a candidate to interview them, and a diverse candidate, and they tell me, I was further encouraged to apply for your position because I know you are a welcoming environment for someone like me. Put the statement on your post. That says so much. That blanket statement of the EEO thing, that's not enough anymore.
Right.
So come up with your own mission and vision. That speaks volumes to a candidate, that you thought that much to come up with a statement of how you feel and how you encourage and how you foster an environment of allyship for a diverse candidate pool. And then the other thing that I always tell people to do is put a statement on your website, because that's the next thing people do.
Right.
They go to the website, and same with us. We have diverse candidates now coming in and say, I love your Center for Intercultural Excellence. I knew that I could be welcome here. And you know what? If hired here, I have some ideas. I want to be a part of the center's work, because it's a passion of mine and experiences I've had, and I want to be able to help the students with that. Definitely, that has to be the intro, the door opener, to foster that environment for candidates to want to be, find your place as an attractive place that welcomes diverse talent.
Yeah. So you led into my next question that I had, and we're not all there with a center like you have. So let's say we get that candidate, they come on board, they want to work here. This is the same for most of our employers. Maybe our efforts aren't as far along inside our organization as, all of the work that you've done there at Tiffin. And so how do we keep them engaged, and how do we retain them as, how do our employers do that as they're trying to build their efforts in this, I'm going to say it, DEIB, adding the B. So how do they retain them? I mean, what are some of the things they can start doing?
Yeah,
I think one of the things we actually talked about, one of the things we talked about last time was implicit bias. We talked about that in our last podcast. And I think it's really important as an employer not to, when you're hiring, when you're working with people, not to have a picture in your head of how you think this role should look, how this person should look, how they should be, how they should act, because then you're siphoning, you're not going to get the potential that they have. There's so many potentials that people have that we don't even know. So realizing your implicit bias before you have these interactions, and maybe how somebody was in that role before, that's not how it necessarily needs to look. And let's be honest, is that how it should look? Maybe that didn't work out well for you. So allowing people to have the ability to be themselves and show you the work they can do, how they can do it, and respecting your decision to hire them, and respecting their experience and need to learn, and know that they could be fabulous if you let them do what they need to do without having a preconceived notion of how this position should look. Go ahead, Nadia. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, that's excellent points. The other thing, and I'm going to almost walk it back a little bit more, to get them in the door, before you hire them, make sure everyone, and this is something we do and we hold steadfast on it, there's not one person who's on that interview panel at Tiffin University that has not gone through this training, that has not sat through our CCU, our Building Cultural Competencies training. And so for any organization, if you want to make sure you're bringing in diverse talent, if you've got that interview panel and there are people in there who've never had unconscious bias training, that might be a problem.
Right.
So make sure that you have people with a diverse mindset that understand you're hiring for a potential, right? That is deciding on the right candidate to bring in. Then when you bring them in, you want to be able to retain that diverse talent. And there's been surveys that say people make that decision within their first 90 days. So we do a 90-day staycation interview. So
like
in the
that.
first 90 days, yes. So, we don't want the honeymoon to be over at all. It takes a lot. It's a very expensive process, talent acquisition, to bring people in and get them in. So you want to keep them.
Yeah.
So we do a 90-day staycation interview and we sit down with the candidate. We first send them out a questionnaire and it's all about them. So it's, it's not your normal manager or employee feedback. It's just them. We want their voice. That's what's important. The managers are copied so they know, gosh, I need to do better at this, or I didn't supply enough resources for this person to be successful. And then they sit down with us and we ask them, how are things going? Do you have all the tools to be successful? What do you love most so far? What are some things we haven't invited or used your skills and knowledge to do? How is your work-life balance in the first 90 days? If I had to give you a rating of 1 to 10, 10 being very comfortable in the balance, where would you put it? Well, how can we get it to a 10?
Right.
These are all things that should be a part of that staycation interview. Create a robust mentorship program. You're bringing in diverse talent. So often they may not find that they, like you mentioned, Anne-Marie, see people like them, but you want them to be comfortable. There's a reason why so many employee engagement surveys, they'll tell you, always ask whether they have a friend at work, right? They tell you that's the secret sauce question, is that if you score really high on that, your engagement score is going to be relatively pretty good. So find out, create their friend at work in the beginning, get them a mentor, have someone to help them ease in and to understand sometimes the hidden rules of, the workplace. So that way they're adjusted. If they're someone of a very different background, those hidden rules can really hit hard. And sometimes people leave because of that, or wrongfully punished because they didn't understand. So a mentor is a beautiful gift that helps them to be able to navigate maybe a landscape that they've never been in before, but they can thrive if they have that opportunity.
These are all really tangible things that, again, I'm going to say this, they sound so simple to do. We're fortunate that we do many of these things that you're talking about. So I'm very energized by that here at McGohan Brabender. But it is a change in business processes if you don't do them. And so that is really, you have to be very intentional about that. And the one thing that I really, out of everything you said, the one thing I really put at the top there was make sure your hiring managers and your interview panelists are trained in cultural awareness and cultural competency.
Yes.
And I love that point. So,
yes. And one huge thing that we recently just did, and it's another huge way to get people in the door and to stay, is making sure your benefit programs are inclusive.
Yes.
That was my
So-
next question. Yep. Please tell us more.
Yes. So you have to evaluate your employee benefit plan. I think there was a study, and I talked about this at somewhere I was speaking, that there was 45% of Caucasian women and 71% of African American or Black women reported of having caregiving responsibilities with children and elders.
Right.
So have you surveyed your population at the workplace to find out what benefits are of interest? So often I hear workplaces assuming, right, what the benefits are that that their people need. But the landscape has changed drastically, especially in the last 2 to 3 years. And I think if you really survey people's needs, they will change. And so evaluate your employee benefit plans and the programs. Ensure that they're adequately support, like in this survey, caregivers within your workforce. Flexible schedules for them to be able to be caregivers in this space. Do you have elder care benefits? We knew a lot of our people were getting pets. We added pet insurance
Yes.
to ours. So team up like companies with companies like McGohan Brabender that have a vast array of benefit options, and sit down and figure out your landscape and who your employees are and what's going to retain them. That's important.
So aside from asking your employees, which I hear, ask your employees, ask them what they want, what they need. I mean, that's obviously the best place maybe to get the information. Is there a particular, besides that, is there a particular organization or podcast or publication that you find has current and accurate, up-to-date information on what's happening out there with employees and what types of things they are looking for? Yeah.
How do you keep up to date with all of the different backgrounds?
Right. For me, it's SHRM. I'm a member of SHRM. I find that they do a wonderful job of staying current and up to date in employee needs and benefits. But I do also survey our own employees. We talk to them to find out what's important to them, because how do you know you're hitting the nail on the head?
When we say survey, like I think our employers might be hearing, you have to do a big formal survey, you need to send out a link, everyone needs to take it. And survey can mean so many things, right?
It can be conversations even. I know we are good at Tiffin. I know our HR department is awesome about sitting with us and asking questions and having a conversation as well. So I think those are important to set those meetings with your employees, and it helps you get to know them and get to know their needs, that individual's needs, as we've talked about, to learn more about them individually as well.
Yeah, it can even be during a manager one-on-one or in a team meeting.
Exactly.
It's that listening, and it's surveying doesn't just mean once a year send out a link and that's what we're doing.
That's kind of cold, right? So you need to understand, because there's a lot of weight sometimes with the request. So you need to understand what's happening. Think about how much you may learn. What if someone says, "Gosh, I've got to put my parents in elderly care. It's expensive," and then and you find out that they move their parents in with them, and this is an employee who sometimes seems frazzled when they show up. You feel like that they're devoid of interest in the workplace. And through this conversation, you're finding out that they're struggling with what to do with their parents. That answers so much more than the benefit lineup, right? That allows you to create a space of grace and understanding for what they're dealing with personally. So I'm a fan of, you can do one-on-ones, feedback, but have the conversation.
Do you find that people are honest when they are asked up front, or when they have this one-on-one conversation? Do they want to share, or are they not comfortable with that?
I would have told you, if you asked me pre-pandemic, I would have said no. They're not honest. They're gonna tell me what they think I want to hear. Right now, so we're currently doing at Tiffin University our workforce retention, but I say it's more of a reattraction assessment. And I saw this on LinkedIn. I cannot claim this one. I'll claim the great reevaluation. That one's mine. It's branded. But someone had posted and said, if you're an employer asking how to retain, you're doing it wrong. You should be asking how to reattract your workforce that's there right now. Gotcha. And that's really what our questions are. Is yes, when you started here, these things might have been important to you, your medical, your dental, your vision, but what now have you found has that changed? What's now important to you? And so that I find is what employers need to do, is find out a way to reattract the current workforce that's there, because it's changed and they are being honest. with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because with everything, again, all things pandemic and the emotions and mental health, people want the help. So they want to let you know, I want a more robust EAP because I'm not getting the counseling help for myself and family through our standard plan. They want to know, gosh, I'm struggling to show up to work on time because I have a kid, and I've seen workplaces partner with care.com to then put certain monies aside monthly to be able to provide childcare services for those workforces, especially if you're, female dominant workplace. That's huge. And so, yes, I feel right now people are being honest. They are excited that you're even asking.
And we've become emboldened, right, through the pandemic to first of all, I don't think we knew what we needed. We didn't know. This is how it's always been. It's been a status quo in how we show up to work and what we do. And then we realized, like Nadia referred to in a previous podcast, we realized what we needed. And for some of us, that was a different look with our family. Kenzie, you asked before about where else do we find this? If you look on LinkedIn, there are groups like the Female Lead. There's working mother groups that are sharing what they need. We're seeing a huge movement
the Mom Project
of working mothers.
Is a good one.
Yeah, the Mom Project.
Yep,
we're seeing a huge wave of not just working mothers, working parents, right? That need to leave early and pick up their kids. The school bus isn't the same, right? Or maybe we're not confident with illness running around, or there's nobody now to grab our kid like there was before because childcare has changed immensely. The costs have gone up. The people that are available that want to do this work post-pandemic is differently. So seeing how that's affecting parents is so important, and being able to have those conversations. Like for me personally, sometimes it's easier to come in and be working at 7 a.m. so that I can comfortably leave, get my daughter, get things going with activities and things. So I think that's something we need to be reading about and learning about, because though I say we're emboldened to have these conversations, there may be some employees that aren't there yet, particularly if they are newer to your culture. So understanding what's going on at large, keeping up with that reading. We'll say it again and again, LinkedIn is such an amazing resource to us that has really, I found, has really come up during the pandemic, of a place to talk about work, to talk about employees, and to read about that employee experience.
Well, it makes me happy to know that people are being honest now, because it is the employees' rule these days. Like, they want to tell you or else they're going to leave, or they're going to reevaluate, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have that right, right? That's something that's happening. We see that there are jobs available everywhere. So how, as an organization, are you going to prove to your employee that you are worthy of them? That's something we have to think about now, that maybe we weren't in the past. How are we worthy of the talent that we're acquiring? We have to show them.
Right. And I think, sometimes, not sometimes, many times, these are hard topics or conversations for managers to have with employees. I think that the managers sometimes feel awkward in asking questions, like they feel like maybe they're prying when they say, like, help me understand, or can you tell me more about, or sometimes they may ask the question in a way that, makes the employee think that if they give the true answer, they might be in trouble, or there could be like a negative consequence. So I do think that it sounds so simple, like have a conversation with another human across the desk from you. There are so many different, as you said, implicit biases that people bring to the table, ideas about, the person's skills or work versus the person. Everything gets, conflated together, and it becomes this really weird, confusing conversation sometimes. And I think what I hear you saying is, take a breath, have a conversation, seek to understand. Good things will probably come from that. And again, it sounds so simple, but in the course of a busy day, with goals and customers and phones and all of those things that, a manufacturing line, everything that has to get done, everyone, I guess I'll say, loses their head and forgets just the basics of how to have this conversation. So I just feel so thankful and enlightened that you keep bringing us back to that, because it does make all the difference in the world when we sit down and have a conversation in this different way.
Yeah. And if you set the tone, think about it. If you're a manager who has unfortunately never really had those conversations or seemed like you cared about it, right? I'm not going to say you can't start caring and doing it now, but take it back to, and I always say, you set the tone and experience that a person's going to have in the interview, and probably even way before the interview, during the phone screen. And so if the candidate got a sense that this is who you are, authentically, the workplace genuinely cares in that interview process, that when you start asking these questions, be very genuine, because that's all they've ever known you to be, is to be a caring place of work. And so, it's kind of hard sometimes to backtrack on that, but you can, and you can change it and be vulnerable. Say, I recognize I have not been present in every sense of the word, to be here for you and supportive of you and to be an ally of you. But I understand that. I've gone through training or whatever, and I want to help me to understand how I can be more of a supportive place of work for you. Mm-hmm. If you do it that way, people are going to be honest. Mm-hmm. But if you can set the tone from the beginning, it makes those conversations more impactful and fruitful, because they're just going to be generated naturally. And you may not, if you do it in the beginning, you may not even need so much to have the conversation, because you're already so well aware of your employees and who the talent are in your area and their needs.
And collaboratively with a training, making sure that leaders and employers are together from all levels in a training means that everybody has that same experience. They know what to expect out of these conversations. They know what's going to happen and the best practices to do this. So when we say things that seem easy, it's because it's getting easier for us, because we've gone through these trainings and we facilitate these trainings, and we are seeing how people are learning to work and converse with each other. So that is when it gets easier, when you invest in these trainings that everybody across the board has.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, Nadia and Julia, as we continue in our 5-part podcast series here, part 2 has come to an end, but our listeners can get very excited for part 3. We'll be discussing how to understand your employees' uniqueness and giving everyone a seat at the table. So to our listeners, please tune in for episode 3 coming up, and thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions about this episode, you can email me at kenzie@healthierbirthdays.com.
Or me at ann@healthierbirthdays.com.
Thanks for joining us. We will see you next time.